Now. All right. Well, good morning, everyone, or good evening, as the case may be, depending on where you are in the world. Michele Molitor here with Wonder Woman Unite. I'm super excited to be here today for our very first expert hour call with our very own Mary Turos, who's going to be leading the discussion and the conversation. And so let me just give you a little heads up about how the call will work today. We'll do some introductions. I'll hand it over to Mary. She's going to share with us some really cool information on how to defrag your brain. And then we'll save some space at the end of the call, probably in the last 10-15 minutes, so we can ask questions and have some more discussion around that. And then we'll end just before the top of the hour. So let me pull up introduction here and share with you Mary Turos, who's going to be facilitating the conversation today. She hails from Maryland on the East Coast and is a leader in bringing neuroscience to the learning process. She founded her company BrainCog LLC in order to offer children and adults with learning, executive function, and behavior time management challenges, some services to become lifelong learners. Mary leads her team of academic coaches in unlocking each individual's learning style and then helping them to use that style to set goals and achieve success. She is a nationally known speaker on a variety of topics, including executive function, ASD, the adolescent brain, self-advocacy, organizational skills, parenting skills, learning styles, and time management. So she regularly blogs and tweets about key issues that individuals...
I have not been blogging lately.
Oh, okay, well, she sometimes blogs and regularly tweets about key issues that individuals, families, and businesses experience. So please give a warm virtual round of applause for Miss Mary and hand it over to her. And I will unpin me and switch to Mary.
Sure. And what I was telling Michele earlier is I was going through this presentation and it's like, I can't give all this information. So what I've tried to do is I've just tried to crystallize the main things that we need to know. And it would be easier if I had some visuals. I do have my brain visual that I may refer to every now and then, but I'm just hoping that number one, we can recognize what we're talking about. Number two, understand why our brains are feeling so overwhelmed these days and the limits that we have in our controls. And then what can we do about it? Right. So, and everybody's a little bit different. And so I hear this a lot, like, why can't we just let it go? How do we change things? How do I deal with interruptions and distractions? And I think even somebody on the site, on the Wonder Woman site, said they always feel like they're thinking about competing thoughts. And so we all go through this, and it's getting worse with the more technology that we have instead of better. We always hear, oh, this is going to make your life so much easier. From the washing, remember the washing machine was supposed to, give us all this free time, this leisure time. And yeah, right. So just want to toss out a couple of rhetorical questions and see if this pattern of behaviors or thoughts kind of matches you or someone you know. So have you ever, or do you know someone who's ever watched TV with a laptop, a tablet, or a phone within arm's reach or on their lap? Don't answer. Okay. Have you ever read email while on a conference call? Or, maybe right now you're checking your phone. Have you ever enjoyed a meal with a cell phone right there? The big thing is now you put it in the middle of the table, but we all know people, including ourselves, who have their cell phone on right next to the fork. Or have you sent a text? This is a big one. Have you sent a text or had a phone conversation, even hands-free, while driving? Do you ever feel nervous about not having checked your email or social media? Have you ever taken your phone to a public restroom or your home bathroom? I saw a guy in the hot tub with his phone the other day. It doesn't make sense. Have you used technology to pass the time when you're bored, when you're standing in line? Okay. Do you suffer from FOMO? Do you know what FOMO is? Does anybody know what FOMO is?
Fear of missing out.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. Always checking. Yeah, that's a real thing. That's a new psychological. And so we've all been there. I mean, if you answered no to all of them, I don't know, you must have just come from some crazy desert island, because we've all done it, and maybe not without even realizing. But this is what's going on in our world today. And so I want to take you through how this really does affect our brains, because our brains, quite frankly, haven't been able to keep up with the technology that's infiltrating into our daily lives. Okay. So I'm going to give you a quick neuroanatomy lesson about how the brain develops, and that might give you some perspective into why are we getting overwhelmed when all of these things are designed to make our lives easier? Why does it feel like things are getting tougher instead of easier? And when I was thinking about it today, when we get to the part about cognitive control, I just want you to have the metacognitive piece. So what I mean by metacognitive is just the thinking about your thinking, because sometimes once you're aware of what you're doing and what's going on as far as a brain processing part, you can make changes to adapt your behaviors. You really can. We really can shape our brain. So I'm going to pull out my brain model. I don't know if everybody can see it. It's so you see this kind of grayish greenish piece here. That's the cerebellum for reference, where my pinkies. Okay. So when your brain is developing, so if this were in my head, this would be, I have a hat too, by the way. So that I'm doing the Martians for science. I'm going to wear my brain hat. So when our brains develop, they develop from the bottom of they come up the brainstem and they go to the front. So I'm going to be talking a lot about this front part that's kind of right above the bridge of your nose. That's what really makes us human, this thing called a prefrontal cortex. And I can give you all kinds of stats, but I won't. So our brains develop from the bottom to the top and from the back to the front. Okay. If we were to go inside the hemispheres of the brain, kind of like right in the middle of the brain, there's this little guy called the amygdala. And the amygdala is, for better or for worse, our emotional gatekeeper. And it kind of sets the gate that opens the door if you're going to have a higher order thought or not. So when we're very stressed, or we have a negative emotion that's tied to the learning experience, there's for a brain's protection, there are hormones that get released up the brainstem that just block higher order thinking from happening. So that's kind of like where you have a fog brain, or you miss, you're not thinking clearly in a stressful situation. So conversely, when we relax, and I think we talked about this a little bit last week, but when we relax, the brain, different neurochemicals are going off in your brain. And when you're relaxed, or the emotion tied to the experience is more positive, then, you feel safe, you can laugh, you feel free to make a mistake. The impulse flies to the front of our brain. And I think somebody measured it. It takes, without brain damage, it takes a full quarter second for a thought impulse to travel from the back of your brain to the front of your brain. So it's not a lot of time, but if you have a lot of interference along that time, you're going to have a lot of disjointed thinking, and that's not efficient for our brains. And so if you've ever had to defrag your computer, where you've loaded all this information, you've loaded your files, and then all of a sudden you're running out of memory space, and then you go in, or you have somebody go in and do a defrag, what they're doing is they're compressing files and maybe eliminating unnecessary competing, maybe you have two files that are competing with each other, but they're essentially the same. You don't need them both. So you compress it, you condense it, and then you open up all this memory for your computer. Well, we can do the same thing to a certain degree with our brains. If we learn to control our environment, control our reaction to our environment, and kind of use technology, but not let it segment our day as we go along. Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to be talking a lot about cognitive control and then interference. And these are psychological, they're neuropsych terms, and they're kind of bandied around and people toss around. If you Google it, you'll get all kinds of crazy definitions for what cognitive control means. But basically what it boils down to is it is the executive function. It is that frontal part of your brain that's kind of telling all the other parts of the brain what it should be doing. But for lack of a better term, to overly simplify it, it's just cognitive control are basically the processes that allow information and behavior to adapt and vary depending on the goal. So that could be good or bad, right? So if you're so focused on your goal that you don't see your house is caught on fire, right? That's bad. So you would want to be able to kind of move your attention to the big distractor that's burning down your house. If you didn't have that, you would die, right? So we need a little bit of both. We need that adaptability and flexibility. We don't want to be so rigid in our thinking that, we die or something bad happens to us, or, we've distracted to the point where it's impairing. We want to have that nice balance. So cognitive control needs to be flexible rather than rigid, but it also needs to, it needs to be condensed at certain times. And I have a little helper here who's trying to distract me. Go lay down. So when I'm talking about interference from a psychological point, there are basically 4 types of interference that can occur. And we call these interruptions. So they can come from an internal disruption or an external disruption. Okay. They can be environmental or they could be within us. So, so when we talk about those, they're usually, so if we have an internal distraction, sometimes it's caused by an external interruption or something going on that's beyond our control. And that's where we find our mind wandering, or it's usually negative in content or worse. So if we're just aware of how this happens and why it's happening, we can kind of take some control over it. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So we have two types of goals. We have what we call the top-down goals. So that's where we're really trying to do something at a higher order thinking skill, and we're pushing away competing thoughts. We're telling everything, get the heck out of here. Or we also have those bottom-up goals that are more, primitive and inherent in our brains that allow us to be aware of things going on in the world beyond us. So imagine you're meeting your friend at Panera or whatever they call it where you are, coffee shop, and you are really trying to focus on what your friend is telling you, the story. And so think of all the things your brain has to eliminate. Your brain has to eliminate all the people talking around you, all the chit chat and the chatter and the background noise, maybe music, people walking in and walking out with coffee, the sound of the coffee maker, all that stuff. You have to make some conscious or subconscious decision to just eliminate that and focus on your friend. That's a top-down behavior. So, but if somebody were to come in, God forbid, into the Panera, with a gun saying, I'm going to shoot everybody up, you don't want to be so focused on your friend's conversation so our primitive brain is going to overrule the top down behavior. Does that make sense? There are some people who have brain illness that wouldn't be able, if somebody came in with a gun and was threatening people, wouldn't be able to just, get out of the conversation and, take cover. That there are some very unhealthy, unhealthy things that can happen. But for most people, they would be able to break it down and take whatever precautions they needed. So that's kind of a quick overview of how our brain sets goals. And everybody in this group has established that they have goals that they want to achieve, but sometimes there are mitigating circumstances or our own self-induced behaviors that prevent us from achieving the goal that we want to achieve. And when I work with kids or young adults or, older people, it boils down to the same thing. When they'll have the best goal, a very honest, earnest goal that they want to achieve. They might even have it broken down into manageable steps of how they want to achieve it. And they could give themselves plenty of time. So you're not putting yourself under the anxious brain that we just talked about where, everything's procrastinated. So why are so many people, more than ever, I have to say, coming out and saying, I'm not achieving my goals or I'm not where I think I should be because of something going on in me? And what it boils down to is we are not able to manage our technology in our life to the point where we think we are. Everybody thinks that they have it under control. And I want to give you a statistic that I thought was very interesting. Let me see if I can find it. So I'm going to talk about teenagers and young adults for this little part, but it could very easily be any one of us. Okay. So they've done studies on this where they found that the average teenager or young adult believes that she or he can juggle 6 to 7 forms of media at the same time. So college kids, and I've witnessed this, I've gone in and observed, college kids are going into a college classroom with 4 to 5 pieces of technology that's supposed to help them, right? And then you layer that with maybe the teachers using some technology. So if the adult's doing, sometimes you have like 7 or 8 pieces of technology in the classroom. And I don't know how old everybody else is, but I remember when I was in college, we had 1 piece of technology, chalk. So if you were doing a math problem, okay, pencil. I wasn't even allowed to do calculus with a graphing calculator because they weren't around. So we did get to use a slide rule and a chart. But think about that. All of that affects your brain, and it thinks and it conditions us to how we react to the situation. So you hear a lot. You hear a lot of complaints nowadays about millennials and how they want the instant gratification and blah 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 blah. That's true to a certain extent, but honestly it is just as bad for all the rest of us because we're all doing the same thing. And what's really funny is that 95% of the American, and they've done this study on American and British primarily, the UK and America, 95% of the population admits to media multitasking. So does everybody know what multitasking is? Yeah. So it's a myth. Multitasking, there's no such thing as multitasking. Hate to break it to you, but you can have multiple devices where you're going from one to the other. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. Let me back up. Multitasking is not what we think it is. So we think, and I have to say women are more prone to think that they can multitask because they're doing multiple things at the same time. But honestly, multitasking is not really what we think it is, because when you're doing a task, you can only give cognitive attention to one goal at a time. It's impossible to give your attention to more than one thing at a time. Okay, so this underscores the biggest issue we have with why we can't get our goals achieved. So true if you can walk and chew gum, that's not multitasking, okay? Because you're probably not giving any attention to your gum chewing, okay? But if you're blowing a bubble, you just might walk into a foam pole, okay? So because if you're focusing on your bubble more than you're focusing on your walking, again, you can only pay attention to one thing at a time. So, I don't know if you guys know this, but in New York City, there's a law that got passed, and I think it might be in Asia too, in some cities in Asia, you are not allowed to text while walking on the street because people were getting run over. And I know when I lived in Hawaii, they when smartphones were first coming out, they also banned. This was very controversial in Asia. Asian women were getting run over in Hawaii because they were wearing really high heel shoes, and texting, and then walking out into traffic. So they passed this law that you can't. First, they tried it with just the shoes. You can't wear. And that didn't go over well. Separate. Okay, that's a separate story. But then they started finding, the common denominator in all these traffic injuries, and some people died. So it is kind of it's funny, but it's not funny. But the commonality between all these cases was that people were looking at their cell phones instead of the big red light and the car coming. So multitasking is a myth. If you're doing two activities at the same time, your brain is simply on autopilot for one of the tasks. Or maybe you're not paying attention to anything. And I see that a lot. I see people who say they have 8 hours worth of homework, or, they have to write this report, they have to give this presentation. And when you narrow it down, if they just gave, single option, single focus on the task, they don't really have 8 hours worth of work. They really have 2 hours worth of work, or maybe 2.5 if you build in some cushion time. I see this 99% of the time, and everybody thinks their particular case is very, very different than anybody else. Oh no, that would never work with me. Oh no. And when you boil it down, it does. Okay.
Mary, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
So on the multitasking myth, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of this is we can only focus on one thing at a time, but it's like we're switching tracks. We're looking at our phone, we're looking at our email, we're looking at this.
So that's actually called something different. That's
okay.
That's task switching. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people use the words interchangeably, but from a neuroscience perspective, there's something else called parallel attention, but that the jury's out on whether that can really happen or not. Like they're studying it. But if you do fMRIs of the brain and you're watching somebody who's multitasking, and you say, I want you to write this paper and listen to your favorite song and sing along, you can't do it. You just can't. You might scribble down a word, but you're not giving cognitive focus to the goal, right? So now if it's background music and you're not singing along with it, and it's just there as, white noise, or some people need, that kind of stimulation to attend to a task, but you're only going to be able to focus on that one task at a time. But what you're talking about, Michele, is task switching. Some researchers call it toggling. So when you're going from one task to another, and we've all been there. We have all been there. I mean, probably within the last half hour, it's happened to some of, seriously. I mean,
I know what you're talking about.
So, you can try to override that, but really when you're toggling back and forth, this is what's interesting is, so if you are a professional, we all have this feeling like we have to be on 24/7, right? Or we set our boundaries and whatever, but we all know that emails are coming in while we're in this meeting, right? We all know that there's stuff we got to do after this meeting. So, let me hear you. I'm getting a lot of feedback. We all know that we have competing. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you, Mary. I was leaving out everybody else's background noise, so I'll mute myself again.
So when we're going back and forth, even if we don't attend to the email, and we're just aware that it's coming in, our brains will take 20 minutes to get back to the starting point. So if you're right now, that whatever that sound is, if I were trying to write a presentation, it would take me another 20 to 30 minutes to get back into the zone I was a minute ago. Yeah, so think about that happening over and over and over. And the technology has changed so rapidly that with our brains, sometimes we don't even have the phone in the room. We don't have any alerts on our laptop. We've closed down everything, but we're still thinking about it. We're like Pavlov's dog, right? I haven't checked my email in 30 minutes. I should probably check it after this meeting. Why? So that's something we can override. So that's what I'm talking about when we defrag our brain. The fMRIs are showing that we're kind of working against ourselves. And from an evolutionary point of view, our brains have not caught up. And so think about the agrarian, when people were roaming and herding, we had thousands of years to adapt to the technology, the rock, the stone, the whatever, the fire, right? And then when the Industrial Revolution that we had lasted 300 years, right? The computer age lasted 30 years, from the late 60s to the late 90s. Now we're in the smart, this is what they call it, and they're breaking it down into wavelets. Now we're in this smart technology phase, and it is changing in weeks, days, months, right? Something that comes now might be gone. So our brains have not really even caught up to the computer age in some cases. And now that's kind of gone, and it's gone into this interactive piece. So the iGen, they're doing a lot of studies on the kids who have grown up. They're calling the millennials that grew up with technology and smart technology. They're the millennials. iPhones, iPads, because the beginning millennials, there's beginning millennials, trailing millennials, and now this millennial group. The beginning millennials are kind of like the tail end of my generation. They're the people that are in their 30s, I guess. They didn't have these smartphones in high school. So they're kind of like the old timers, and they're not as affected by this, right? In many cases. But when you look around, we only have so much cognitive reserve to dedicate to the tasks that we set as our goals. So we really need to be aware of what we're doing. And there are studies out there that people admitted to using their phones at crazy times, checking their smartphones. So yeah, we use it to get away from boredom when we're in the line, and we really shouldn't be doing that, because that's the time that our brain could be condensing some of the input that's stimulating our brains all the time. It's very important that we get bored. We retrain our brains to be bored so that our brains can process more efficiently and really take the data that we're feeding it put it into the right spots or dump it, right? So we're not on brain overload all the time. So sleep is going to be another factor if we have time, we can talk a little bit about how sleep is impacted by technology and how we need sleep. Yes. Yeah.
So when you said we need to let our brains be bored, my whole body went, "Oh no, I don't like being bored."
Yeah. So maybe don't call it being bored, and boredom, oddly, this has not been something that has been heavily studied psychologically until just now, just in the past couple of years.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. So, and everybody's got a slightly different view of what is boredom, right? So boredom is when you're not, the novelty is not there, or the newness, or you feel like you're wasting time. But a lot of it comes from that fear of what am I missing out on? How can I use my time better? And this is probably one of the most interesting things that I'm aware of now. I'm looking at my clients a little bit differently when, I see all the things they're doing and they don't have any, so I maybe call it chill out time or whatever you want to call it. Maybe don't call it boredom time, think time, collaboration time. There's a reason people have their best ideas in the bathtub or the shower or when they're laying on the beach, right? The ideas come. It's because your brains kind of have been allowed to condense and crystallize. But it's fascinating. They've done these studies, like I was saying, they've done these studies, and they even found that 9% of the general population admitted to using their smartphones during sexual intercourse.
Get out. That's a little hard to multitast in that kind of way.
I'm like,
excuse me, hold on for that, honey. I mean,
like, Kama Sutra, I don't know. Like, what would you be using? Like, that's sad. But what they saw was that people had such a fear of missing out, God, that they had to take their phone.
I mean, I take a book with me pretty much everywhere for that very reason. Like, if I have a moment, I can read, right? There's something else I can be doing, and my phone has replaced that. But yeah, no, not during sex.
But think about that, though. And we, like I could spend a whole week just talking about that. But just being aware of it, these are little snippets of time. And if you're looking at your phone, and then you're going into to work with a client, you're really not on your best game. You're really not, because you want to get yourself in the zone before you walk in. So maybe cut off technology, or, we can talk about specific strategies in a couple minutes, but
if you want, let me give a quick example of how bad this can be. I was at a co-facilitating an all-day leadership conference, and I wasn't at the front of the room. I was kind of at the back of the room, not having to speak at that point, and I was checking my emails on my phone, and I got an email from a very dear friend saying that her boyfriend had committed suicide in the next room where she was there. And I was like blown away, right? Like, it was devastating because he was a good friend of mine. And, then you're just like, brain gone. And so after that, I was like, okay, note to self, do not check emails while presenting, because you never know what's going to come in that's going to completely take you out of the game and off track from what you're doing. So that was a hard way to learn that lesson, though.
Yeah. And, and that's a tricky one, in the sense that, you need to stay connected, right? You need to know what's going on if, God forbid, the worst thing happens. But you're right. Like, you just have to work with your boundaries in that. But you were all amygdala when you were giving that presentation then, because you're not human if you don't have, a heartfelt reaction to your friend.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we all need to strengthen our cognitive control. We all need to minimize limitations, reduce goal interference. And this is where what's cool, because we can do it. The neuroplasticity of our brains allow us to make changes. And what's really cool about this is what science is showing, what the studies are showing, like 30 years of research are showing, is that, if we can train our brains to defrag itself, we create essentially a cognitive reserve that has benefits years later. So if we can focus our attention on our goals, limit these competing thoughts, a lot of times it's thoughts for us, if we can get rid of that or at least minimize it, it's going to make our brains a lot healthier down the road. They don't know exactly why, but they think it's because you're creating more connections in your neural pathways, and actually even on the cellular level. So it's fascinating stuff coming out. And they used to think that this was more for kids, but they've done a lot of studies with older people. And yeah, they have the benefits of the cognitive control reserve really getting replenished and staying there for years. So that's kind of cool. That's a very, very encouraging information. But I think it's important to realize that no matter how smart you are, or how organized you are, or how type A you are, or whatever you want to call yourself, if you can do this, you're going to be much more efficient in the work that you do, and you're going to be happier, because you're going to have some time to be bored. You're going to have some time to do things that you want to do that don't require the cognitive focus that all of our careers are using up every day. So, it was interesting. Today I was at the gym and I caught myself doing it. I was in a weightlifting class, right? And, you have to focus on your form. And all of a sudden I started thinking about, okay, what am I going to do after this class? What should I go to the grocery store? Or should I make my phone call? And I'm like, stop. Let's just focus on the class, right? So I got through the class, walked down the class, sat in the hot tub for a little bit, got the jets going. Damned if I didn't do it again. It's like, I could be, I give myself 15 minutes to sit in the hot tub. So I was sitting there in this hot tub and I was thinking about all these other things, like I should be calling this doctor, and I want to do this writing. And I'm like, okay, stop. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy these 15 minutes and think about the bubbles or, something else. So, so that's the kind of stuff, it creeps in and we're not even aware a lot of the times that we're doing this. And this is where we kind of waste time, or you end up on Facebook for, I'm just going to check my Facebook. And then 2 hours later, it's like, what just happened? Because sometimes we need that connection, I guess. So if we could just learn and be aware that is happening, we can control it. So you always want to know what's going on before you have to identify what your weakness is and what your challenges are before you can start attacking them and changing anything. And those are kind of the big ones. And you want to maximize cognitive control. You want to minimize your limitations. And I'm just going to talk about a couple, like I guess I have 4 main ones I was tracking with most of the clients that I see. I'm just going to lay out some basic things that you might want to try, and then I'll open it up to questions. So one big distraction is the phone in our cars. And depending on where you live, there are different laws regarding hand-free sets, or you can talk on your phone. Really, we should not be having any conversations in the car, especially not business conversations or anything that requires you to take your focus off the road. We all think that this phone call is so important, or I'm just going to make it real quick, or I'm really good at texting. I can look up and down. So you see, when you go to a stop sign, you see everybody's got their head down in their lap. they're doing it. So it's worse than drunk driving. Even the hands-free sets, ever since they came out, accident rates have gone up. Yeah, accident rates have gone up. So because think about it, when you are having a conversation that you deem important, you're giving your cognitive control to whatever's happening in that conversation, right? So when you're doing that, you either miss your exit, or you stop short, or you hit somebody, or I almost hit the curb, or whatever, so it's been shown, even if you think you should not be doing it. And there are a lot of devices that will save us from ourselves. If you don't want to get any apps if you don't have the self-control and you're not an app person, you can put your phone in the trunk. Serious. I know. See, look, everybody's like, no, right? You could, though, with Bluetooth off, so you can't hit the button on your steering wheel.
I'm not kidding you, Mary. My shoulders just went when you said that. I'm like, oh, wow.
I know. But there are some apps that have had some, to help us with this, so to speak. Because some people are like, well, what if there's an emergency? And it's like, I don't know. I used to drive around all over the place without a phone. If you needed a phone, you went to the payphone, which I know are hard.
In airplane mode while you're in the car.
Right? Or, but then if it's in arm's reach, it's so. And then here's the one I get. But what if my kid is calling me and there's an emergency? I'm like, well, if you're driving for hours and hours and hours, maybe you stop every 45 minutes and check your phone. Or there are actually apps that will override emergencies. So if somebody were, if you did have it on airplane mode or whatever, it could still get through. So a couple of apps that have been shown to be very helpful, and I can list them separately somewhere else. But Drive Off, Drive Mode, Live to Text, Text Shield, and Safe Drive. I can put them in a message somewhere else. The other thing is you can go really old school, when we all had flip phones, car phones. Remember when we called them car phones, and you had 30 minutes of, you couldn't talk on your phone for 30 minutes, and they were truly there only for an emergency. I had one, it was like this big. It's awful. But, you could just let people know about your commute. So, I should be at this, and I'll call you when I get there, and I should be there in 30 minutes. So if the person doesn't hear from you, then they can reach out. But there are ways around it. There are total ways around it. So ironically, there's an app on your phone that'll help you get away from apps on your phone. So that'll limit the apps on your phone. So take that for what it is. Or you can just work, maybe you go on a short ride and you put your phone in the back seat, and and then you slowly increase the time by a minute to build that cognitive control. That will probably be the number one most stressful thing. And that should tell you a lot about yourself and your relationship with your technology and how it's affecting your brain. So I'm just going to leave that one out there. The thing that I was talking about earlier, when I was at the gym, interruptions with our own thoughts, right? I don't know if you guys, and I am open to suggestions on this one, because this one is a constant battle, but there are also apps for that. Like if you just want to focus, again, I went old school. I would just set a timer on my oven even and say, I'm going to read my book for 37 minutes or whatever it is. And that's all I'm going to do. It sounds crazy, but these are things that we have to do. Interruptions with your thoughts, again, being aware, the metacognitive piece, being aware, also tracking your time, because I find that nobody ever thinks they're spending as much time with technology as they really are. And again, this sounds kind of cheeky, but you can have an app to track your app usage. And so you get a data point. So you might be saying to yourself, oh no, I spend no more than 15 minutes on Facebook. I just check in real quick. And then you look at your app, or you look at the thing on your computer or your phone, and you're like, holy cow. And at the end of the week, you see you spent 20 hours on social media that weren't work related or more. I know in Facebook. Okay, got it. Email, there are lots of ways you can set boundaries for your emails. Institute a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. rule for yourself and for others. Some of this is really about training yourself and training others in your life. And this is going to make some of you very nervous, but they have done studies on this. And what seems to reduce stress best is to partition your day into project periods and check your email no more than 3 times a day. So, and remember that distractions eat up 20 to 30 minutes. So if you're just glancing at your email, it's going to take you 30 minutes to come back to your original starting point. So when you partition your day, this is going to take effort if you're in a 24/7, but I have stockbrokers doing this, day traders doing this. And you have to train your clients, and you have to train them that if it is urgent, call me between these hours, right? Or whatever you want to set as your own boundaries. And it'll be bumpy in the beginning, but people adapt pretty quickly. But if you partition your day into project periods, it's going to allow you to use your cognitive control to get you to where it is you want to be. And if I hear a lot of people who have problems specifically writing, like they have to write for a presentation, or they have to, but they're distracted by things going on in their own computer. Well, if you don't just minimize your screens, close them up. And again, there are a few apps that I've been playing around with that I can, again, put on the site. But there's one specifically that allows you to use certain tools for a specified period of time, and that's called Concentrate or Think. So if you don't have self-control, if you're like, oh, I just want to check and see, did my mom email me back? It won't let you because it'll say, nope, that's the boundary you set. And there are a bunch of them for writing that'll actually, if you go to a non-writing task, there are apps out there that will shut down whatever it is you're trying to open if they're not writing related. So if you try to open a website, if you're trying to look at what's going on CNN and, the Supreme Court, it'll say, this is a non-writing program, bye, and it'll shut it down. So sometimes the external environment needs to be controlled, but remember, we just need to condense our thoughts down and so that we have the top down and the bottom up behaviors going on in our brain. And that's like, I can spin out of control at this point. So Michele gave me the hook, so I'm going to stop now. But do you see why it's so hard to stop on this? Because there's so much data and research coming out, and I don't know how interesting it is to research boredom, but I'll volunteer for it. We'll take some Caribbean beach for a bit.
Yeah, no, it's all fascinating stuff, and
it's all common sense stuff, right? But there's the science to back it up. Like, there's science behind, brain scans, blood flow. We're measuring blood flow, where our thoughts are taking us, and that's where a lot of people are getting in their own way.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally, I'm completely guilty of everything we've discussed today. So, request is to type up maybe some of the different apps that you mentioned into a Word document. We can paste it up into the Facebook group, and I can also put it up onto the private membership site.
Okay.
Right. But what we've got a couple more minutes here on the line. What questions do you guys have, if any, for Miss Mary?
So are there any challenges?
Yeah.
This is Liz. This is Liz in St. Louis.
Hi, Liz. Welcome.
Hi. I've been sitting at my kitchen island listening to this on the phone because I have found that using programs like Zoom are really distracting for me if I'm at my computer, because I'll be looking at the people and then I might click away and go play on my computer. So I've just been sitting here staring out my kitchen window watching the birds. I can totally relate to everything that Mary has been saying. And it's been, for this year, it's been my focus to really focus in on and be a monotasker again. I used to work in corporate America and thought I was this great multitasker. And when I was married, I had my son and he would be asking me a question at the same time my husband would be, and I'd be directing them and telling them what, oh yeah, your tennis shoes are in your room under your bed, and I can't do that anymore.
Right.
And I don't want to. And I was curious if you had heard about, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of his company, but a guy who I think he helped develop Google, has started a company that basically is telling you to get your time back and to get off of social media. And he even has set up his phone and shows you how to set up your smartphone so that you have only like the most important things on your home screen. And then if you have to go to like social media, you put it on a different page. And you can put it pretty deep into your phone so that it's harder to get to. And so it's a really conscious thing instead of the unconscious thing that most people do.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I noticed with Facebook, when I had it on my phone as an app, I was using it because you just finger swipe it. But when you so I removed it from my phone. And if I want to check Facebook, I have to go to the Facebook, www.facebook, and type in my login. And that has conditioned me to not be on Facebook so much. Honestly.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, and that was a relatively quick turnaround. But I'll check out the only apps that I've been really following are the ones that they're doing brain studies on that has been shown to help those. But I'll definitely look into that. It's interesting. There's actually a cognitive control. They really want to focus on helping people develop more cognitive control, especially older adults and the millennials. And there's a really cool game. You can't buy it, but it's used for research, and it's called NeuroRacer. And basically what it does is you wear a skull cap with all the electrodes, and you control everything with your brain thoughts. So if your brain, and I've done a modified version of this myself because I didn't believe it, but if your brain goes out of a certain megahertz, and it'll help you readjust and focus. So there was something similar that came out a bunch of years ago for ADHD kids because they have particular challenges with this. And the only issues that came out of those studies were that the cognitive control did not seem to last more than 6 months. But now what we're finding is as you do this stuff, if you build it and you keep building on it and keep challenging yourself on it, you do build that cognitive reserve. So it's very exciting data coming out.
Could I ask one more question?
Oh yeah, go right ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead. The next person can ask.
I was just going to ask quickly, Mary, what I notice in my work with folks is that a lot of people, we just aren't present, right? Mm-hmm. We're not here because we're thinking about all these other things. So what would you say about, what have you seen as far as research about how meditation can really help us?
Oh my gosh, meditation and physical exercise are the two that have the highest levels of efficacy in developing, we're talking about all these apps and all this other stuff, but really meditation, nature exposure, like taking a walk in nature, some of these cognitive exercises, those have really, really helped build cognitive reserve. And what is interesting, is that working memory, your ability to hold information for a task, working memory shot up tremendously during for people who meditated and for people who did nature walks. But interestingly, an urban walk was the opposite. So if you're walking through the city, it did not have the same benefits as walking through a park. That's why green space is so important. And the thought is because when you're walking through a green space, you don't have to be on alert by being hit by a car or dodging in and out of traffic. Seriously, your mind can actually relax and go from being top down to bottom up, and that, you need that, and it allows you to focus. But meditation, there's a type of meditation, you probably know about this better than I do, Michele. There's something called focused attention meditation, or some people are calling it concentrative meditation, where you're not necessarily where you're focusing on something rather than letting the thoughts just flow through. That seems to build a reserve. So it's really interesting. And the cool thing about that is there's no bad side effect, right? What's the bad side effect of taking a walk in a park? What's the bad side effect of meditating? Nothing. And then of course you can also do medication. But, why go on meds when you can try some other things? And then more controversial are the brain stimulation and the neurofeedback. Neurofeedback's not too controversial, but it doesn't. The data is there's just not enough science backing up whether meds, believe it or not, and neurofeedback and brainstem will actually give you the same results as physical exercise and meditation. You can't go wrong. So if you can do it, definitely do it.
Yeah.
It's hard. I took a meditation class about 2 years ago. And when I first took it, I was like, well, how can I think about nothing? And isn't thinking about nothing actually thinking about something? And the guy was like, oh my God, stop. Just stop yourself.
That's why I like guided meditations, because it gives your brain something to focus on.
Yeah.
But it narrows the field, right?
Yeah.
That's something that I've got up on the Wonder Woman on the membership page. I have some guided meditations up there. If you gals are interested, be sure to go out there. And if you don't have, if you're new to Wonder Woman and you don't have the link and the username password for the backend site, I'll post it back up on we have a private Facebook page, private Facebook group as well, and I will post it up there too. So there's lots of different resources, but we're coming to the top of the hour, and I've got to hop off because I got another call on Zoom. So I want to thank you, Mary, so much for this brilliant, fascinating, interesting discussion. And as I said, we can geek out offline on some of this other cool research you've got. But I really want to thank everybody who's here, and know that our next Wonder Woman Unite call is going to be on April 21st, 9:30 a.m. Via Zoom, and I'll be sending out all of that. That's Pacific time. I'll be sending out all the data points for that, and then we'll have get our next expert hour scheduled for next month too. So you guys have a wonderful day, and we will see you all soon. All right.
Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.